Let's go out to the Dean Leasing Hotline. From Blogging the Boys, the best and only Brandon Loree. Brandon, why don't you go ahead and tell the folks at home, what are you doing on a Thursday afternoon at 8 o'clock if you weren't on the air with us?
I would say probably just sitting back, watching some film of some draft prospects. But, I mean, I would not want to be anywhere else but here, and also talk about maybe some strawberry milk. It's not my cup of tea, but, you know, I know you guys were talking about that earlier. A little gross for my taste, but I'd rather be nowhere else except for here.
Have you had raw milk before?
I have not, and I do not want to dabble in that field. A little lactose intolerance on my end, so I got to stay clear of that.
Fun fact: all humans are lactose intolerant. I don't know if I agree with that. The ones that can drink milk are the aliens. So don't feel weird. You're just like the rest of us. We actually are not supposed to have milk in our bodies. Just want to give you that little fun fact.
I'm lactose tolerant, baby.
Yeah, whatever
all
Fred just
lactose.
said. When you see the 30-day visits that Todd Archer put out today, what was your first thoughts? I know we're going to get more names in the coming days. We also got Dallas Day guys, so I'm not going to jump to huge conclusions. But what did you gather from that list?
Yeah, I think, first right off the bat, I think the top three are the most important, right, with wide receiver. I know we were talking about that, you and I, Blake, back and forth, of where the level of concern is for fans and where the Cowboys need to address their needs. And I do think Stephen Jones talked about it, where wide receiver 2 needs to be upgraded. And I think that, they have high hopes for Jonathan Mingo. I know we've talked about him a lot during our time here, but I do think that they need to add somebody who's a little bit more explosive and a very good complement to CeeDee Lamb. And when you look at Emeka Egbuka, Tet McMillan, and Luther Burden, I would say Luther Burden's probably most similar to CeeDee, but Tet's that big body receiver that if you're looking to just go up and grab the ball, I know Joe Hoyt of All City Dallas, DLLS, he put out a great piece about how Tet's volleyball background has helped them kind of elevate and high point the football. And I think Emeka Egbuka, he is your consummate, number 2 wide receiver. He's had the most receptions of all time in Ohio State history, but he's always been the second player to sort of the stars of like a Garrett Wilson and other guys at Ohio State. So I think he would fit into that role perfectly. And I think he has room to grow into a potential number 1 if CeeDee ever missed some time. But I think all 3 guys at the top of the list are the ones that I kind of circle, and then the rest I think are some interesting names too.
So, and we saw that Matthew Golden wasn't on that list. Where does he stand for you? And, the one thing me and Blake said is that, again, 12, maybe with those guys, the Abukas of the world, the Luther Burdens might be a little high at 12, but where are you at on Golden? And ultimately, at that number 12, are you okay with them taking a wide receiver?
Yeah, I'm okay with them taking a wide receiver. I think that Golden, for me, he'd probably be 4th out of this 3 here, so I would kind of put it as Tet number 1. I put Emeka Egbuka number 2, Burden number 3, and then probably Golden at 4. And listen, that's just me personally. I think that you look at someone like a Daniel Jeremiah, he has Matthew Golden at number 1 as his number 1 wide receiver, and Daniel Jeremiah has been doing this for a very long time. So I hold his opinion in high regard. I think he would be a great fit for this team. Again, another speed element that the Cowboys could definitely use outside of a guy like Kevontae Turpin. Imagine a set of wide receivers on the field at one point with CeeDee Lamb, Matthew Golden, Kevontae Turpin. Maybe you throw a little Jonathan Mingo or Jalen Tolbert in there. I think that's pretty good. So me personally, I'd have him a little bit lower. But I think wide receiver is an absolute need for this team, and addressing it at 12 to me would not be a shock.
When our back and forth on Twitter kind of stemmed from everybody knows they need a wide receiver 2, knows they need a running back, and I think we both agree they need to address that. But I think something that's not being talked about a bunch, and kind of what me and you were talking about on Twitter, was the cornerback position. Your concern level on that, and where do you think is the sweet spot to get either an outside corner or a slot corner to go with your current roster?
I agree with you. I think corner is a big concern, and not just because when you look at long-term, we know Deron Bland is going into the final year of his deal. We need to see where the health is of Trayvon Diggs. By all accounts, things are going very well with him down in South Florida at Alchemy Sports. I actually did a profile on that on Blogging the Boys, so if anybody wants to know where things are at with Trayvon Diggs, feel free to check that out. Spoke with his trainer, Dr. Sharif, personally down there. So things are going very well for him, but it's a slow build. You can't rush anything with that. We know that Stephen Jones mentioned that it doesn't look like him and Overshown are going to be ready for the start of the year. That was always kind of the idea in the plan. So you need to get some contingencies in place if that's going to be true after training camp. So for me, you have Deron Bland, which is great. You need to see where Kalen Carson is at in year 2. I know they traded for Kyer Elam. Anytime the Cowboys have traded for a player, they always give them sort of every opportunity to prove themselves, and we know he's a former first-round pick, so that's great. I personally, give me Jahdae Barron at 12th overall. I think he would be great for this team. Tyler Guyton was on an interview a little while ago, I believe either a day or two, and I posted the clip on Twitter that, when he was asked who does he want the Cowboys to draft, he mentioned Jahdae Barron because Jordan Lewis is no longer here. He mentioned how losing him was a big concern. Shout out to Tyler Guyton being a certified GM on his part. And he mentioned that Jahdae Barron said he really, really wants to be a Cowboy. So to me, that kind of checks every box. He has inside-outside versatility. Tommy Yarish has talked about him, too. He's a former Texas reporter, also now covers the Cowboys. I just think he checks all the boxes that you need. He has the demeanor. He's willing to tackle, be physical, very similar to what I know a lot of people are comparing him to Trent McDuffie. We know what he's been doing in Kansas City for the Chiefs. And then also some people think he might have some sort of Brian Branch versatility, too. So,
I like those names. I like those names.
Wow.
With your level of concerns, Blake, 1 and 2, you kind of fill both those needs in one player.
And see, that's kind of where I'm at, where you're figuring out that hole. And I still like wide receivers in the second round. I still like a Jack Besh. I still like a Restrepo out of Miami. They are in a weird situation where you wish they had like 4 late first rounders or second rounders. That's kind of where all the guys you need. You're only going to be able to take so many. I wonder how they're going to attack free agency. So that goes to my next. What position do you think won't get filled in the draft and they'll have to address post free agency, if any?
Maybe
or post-draft,
linebacker. Yeah, maybe linebacker. Corner, potentially, but I just think that's too high of a need. But I would say linebacker, just given where things are at as far as the level of player. I think that they probably will come out with at least one. But when you're looking at the quality of the player, maybe it's a dart throw in the 6th round and it becomes more of a special teams player, kind of like a Damian Wilson that we saw years ago. And that's, to me, the most important thing for them is if they had this 4th round pick, I think that would do so much more for them when it came to the draft. You look at the level of 4th round players they've been able to find. You have, of course, with Dak Prescott, but I also look at someone years ago that was, I know, a fan favorite in Anthony Hitchens. He was a 4th round guy. You look at Matt Eberflus, he was here when Hitchens was here, and he was sort of that typical blue-collar type linebacker and proved to be a really good player for the Cowboys and went on to do great things with the Chiefs. So, to me, if you can get that 4th round pick back, I think that's sort of the sweet spot if you can get a linebacker there. But again, I think that if you have a guy like Eric Kendricks still sitting out there in free agency, maybe he comes back. I know Todd Archer mentioned that could be a possibility. And it mentioned Brandon Cooks, but I know he's with New Orleans now. So we'll see where things shake out. But I think linebacker might be that sort of post-draft kind of need going into free agency of that 3rd, 4th wave.
Brandon Loree, Blog of the Boys, joining us here on Fan After Dark. We don't think there's a strong likelihood that the Cowboys will move back. Not that they don't want to, but I just feel like because of the talent and just because every other team wants to move up, or wants to move back, I don't know that there's going to be enough opportunities there to do it. I think if they can do it, great. Do you think maybe the 2nd round pick would be a situation where it might actually be more attractive or it might actually be more likely that they have a chance to move back as opposed to in the 1st round? And get another pick.
I think that's a great point by you there, Fred. I think if you have a couple of running backs there, right, in the 2nd round, you might have a Caleb Johnson, you may have a Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, and you say, let's say there's a team at the back half of the 2nd round that wants to come up and grab one of those guys. Well, if the Cowboys feel confident that, they signed a couple free agent runners, they can get one of those guys late in the 2nd round and maybe pick up a 4th. I think that could be the sweet spot. If they don't take an Ashton Genty in the 1st round, I don't think Omarion Hampton would be in consideration for me at 12. I know he's been mocked by Mel Kiper a couple times, but if you can get some team to trade up for a runner so that's the way they get their guy and you can get one in the 2nd round a little later, I think that's great. But I think in the 1st round, to me, I always thought there could be a trade back scenario, but the more I kind of look at the draft, the more I hear from a lot of people and analysts. It's like, who are these teams at the back half of the 1st round going to trade up for? Maybe it is a Shamar Stewart. Do you want to entice a team with a player like that who has high athletic traits, but maybe is a little more raw? But I think the way Brian Schottenheimer talked in his press conference at the owners' meetings is that he said you want to get a blue chip player at 12th overall. You don't want to be picking this high ever again. You want a difference maker. So for me, it's like if he wants to kind of put his stamp on this team in his era at the beginning of it, get a great player at 12th overall, and then maybe do some maneuvering after that.
Brandon Loree, Blogging the Boys, joining us here talking all things Dallas Cowboys. We'll get to your post from the other day because I think that loomed large and had a large factor in why Jerry said what he said about the Micah Parsons negotiation. But before we do that, Joe Milton, that good deal goes down today. Obviously, that frees up a draft pick. Of course, you got rid of one, but you feel good about that because, I mean, let's call it what it is. Joe Milton's probably better than any day 3 pick you were going to spend. Where are you at on Joe Milton?
I'm ready for Milton Mania, baby.
Okay.
Milton Domingo.
I love it.
Listen, I'll say this. You're going to see a lot of Joe Milton to Jonathan Mingo highlights, whether it's training camp, whether it's the preseason. I think preseason football is going to be awesome for the Cowboys this year with him. I mean, he just has a cannon of an arm. I mean, there's no doubt about that. Coming out of the draft, I mean, he was somebody that a lot of teams were just looking to just take a dart throw on because of his arm talent. Very raw as a player, still working out the kinks as far as mechanics, being an NFL quarterback. You hope that you can get with somebody like a Brian Schottenheimer, kind of develop him a little bit, get in the room with Dak Prescott. And you look at the final game of the year for him against the Buffalo Bills, there was some good stuff that he did, some escapability. And, you know, people will say the level of competition might not have been there for Buffalo, kind of locking up a playoff spot for them on that end. But I do think that for him, there were a lot of good flashes. And I look at it this way. It's a 5th-round pick. Again, it's a dart throw. It's not as high as the Trey Lance. And when you look at team control, there are still 3 years left on his deal. They're saving at about $2 million a year, given what Cooper Rush just got. And me personally, I thought bringing back Cooper Rush would have been great for the Cowboys. But if you're looking to kind of turn onto the other coin of that, where you pull away from the veteran proven backup and you feel confident in trying to develop somebody, maybe Milton turns into a great backup. Maybe he turns into a great player you can leverage for a draft pick a year or two from now. But I think that just taking a dart throw on him right now is a great risk, and I love the move a lot.
Brandon, I got one that maybe you weren't expecting. Not really talked about this offseason. I was high on it as soon as the season ended, but there's so many different needs that we haven't had at the top of the priority list, but it's still a concern of mine. The safety position, Donovan Wilson, Malik Hooker, obviously with pretty below average years last year. How do you think that position battle, or if there even will be one, play out with Izzy McQuamu and our boy Wanye Thomas? Do those two guys get spots at safety, get some nickel work? How do you think Malik Hooker and Donovan Wilson, as far as the contracts work out? What do you think about that secondary outside of, Bland and Diggs and Carson?
Yeah, I'm hoping for a bounce back year from those two. I think that what you saw from them, especially from Donovan Wilson before he got his contract extension, I mean, he should have been a Pro Bowl player. He should have been in the Pro Bowl. I really thought he was sort of the defensive chess piece for the Cowboys outside of Micah Parsons. He was great as more of a sort of blitzing safety. He's great in a physical player. So defending the run is never an issue for him. Pass, coverage is a little spotty here and there, but I just think, when you look at Matt Eberflus's defensive scheme and what he was able to do with the safeties in Chicago, there were a lot of great players that he was working with. And I do think that the safeties kind of elevated their play under his scheme. And I do think that Malik Hooker and Donovan Wilson may be under a new umbrella of defense. You got to remember, a lot of these guys were learning stuff on the fly, of course, with Mike Zimmer coming in as a first-year coordinator for the Cowboys, and now they're going to have to learn something new. But I think Eberflus has proven to be really good as far as helping the safeties out. So I think that it's going to be a bounce-back year for them. But listen, I wouldn't sleep on a Marquise Bell or a Wanye Thomas. I think that they are going to get an opportunity to compete. I think Wanye is a great pass coverage safety, and we know Marquise Bell can be as physical and also pretty good in coverage too. So I wouldn't sleep on those guys.
All right, so your post the other day, the podcast of France and them talking about the Dak negotiation, basically alluding to the fact that, the Cowboys, a.k.a. Jerry and Steven, decided they were going to wait and not really do a whole lot during the offseason, and it came down to kind of the very end, as we saw on, week one, during the, right leading up to the game before the deal was actually made. Just a little bit about, kind of any insights that you got as far as kind of what your biggest takeaway was from that, and then did you think that had any influence on kind of the way Jerry, who I thought was somewhat defensive when talking about the Micah and David Mulligetta negotiations the very next day?
So I'll say this and cite it first. It's the Athletes First Family podcast. And the most shocking thing for me was how little viewing that they had on this podcast. To me, it's something that I've kind of followed. They had their quarterback series. I knew eventually that Dak Prescott would come up as sort of their creme de la creme quarterback that they were leading up to. They talked about Jordan Love. They talked about the Tua contracts. And so when I was listening to the podcast, I was like, this was very insightful stuff behind the scenes negotiations of what happened with Dak and multiple contracts, not only just the negotiations for this recent one, but also the big one that he signed about 4 years ago, or 3 years ago, rather. So I just thought it was shocking that there wasn't as much exposure. So when writing the piece, I wanted to kind of really break things down for fans that, was in the podcast, that maybe people want a little bit more of a Cliff Note version of it. But I look at, Todd France is a genius when it comes to how he was able to do all these things. And I think that for the Cowboys side of things, they had their hands behind their back. They had it tied behind their backs, where he knew that the minute they got rid of the franchise tag clause in that first deal that he signed, the first veteran contract extension, they could never tag Dak again. Like he said in the pod, he said, we had a 4-year deal in place, but in reality, it was a 3-year deal because we knew that they couldn't tag Dak after that 4th year. So we would have had to come back to the table and renegotiate something else. And that's exactly what they did. They kind of came up with a contract, the most recent one, with a year left on Dak's deal. So I look at with where Jerry's at with the Micah conversation. It's not a shock to me that it's taken a little bit more time. They mentioned in the episode that when it came to Dak's contract negotiations for last year, it really wasn't until training camp, until they started conversations. They wanted to kind of talk with Dak a little bit, but by that point, I think Dak knew who he was talking with. I think he was a little bit more aware of how the Joneses do negotiations. We heard Dak say at a couple press conferences that he was very comfortable with where things were going to play out. If it meant that his time in Dallas was up, he's looking forward to maybe expanding his horizons. And even France said that he thinks that there was a possibility Dak would not have been in Dallas had they not worked out a deal. Luckily, we don't have to think and live in that world, because it's a very scary world to live in. But I do think when you look at Micah Parsons, I think that they're trying to make sure that they have everything buttoned up and wrapped up, and make sure that they know that they're going to pay the player. Micah will be on the team for the foreseeable future, but trying to make sure that they can get as much out of it on their side of things, knowing all well that they're going to have to pay him a lump sum of change.
Great stuff from you as always, Mr. Loree. Tell the folks at home where they can find you at on X and where they can find your newsletter.
Yeah, it's at Brandon is Right. That's WRITE. And then it's the Press Coverage newsletter. Maybe I'll have to have some sort of fan after dark collaboration with you guys. Maybe a little mailbag action going on.
100%.
So, got a bunch of things kind of in the works moving forward throughout the offseason heading into next year, too.
Mr. Loree, great stuff from you as always. Let's do this again in a couple weeks when we do a little right before the draft preview. Sound good?
Yeah, and maybe let's try some strawberry milk. Maybe we need to get back on that wagon and see how it goes.
You ain't got to tell me twice. You do not have to tell me twice. Brandon, have yourself a wonderful weekend, and don't do anything I wouldn't do.
Thanks, guys. Take care.